They didn't call it a disaster. They didn't hold a press conference. They didn't apologize. They simply erased it. For decades, Americans lived their lives without knowing that an entire community was sacrificed in silence, not by war, not by nature, but by a decision made behind closed doors. This isn't a theory. This isn't a rumor. This is documented history that almost disappeared forever. In the early 20th century, America was racing toward progress. Factories expanded, railroads stretched across states, and new technologies promised a brighter future. But progress always demanded a price. Sometimes that price was paid by people who never agreed to it. Hidden deep within government archives is the story of a town that once existed, worked, and dreamed just like any other American community. Children went to school, fathers went to work, mothers planned futures. Then, quietly, everything began to change. Officials arrived without explanation. Surveys were conducted, maps were redrawn, notices were posted but never clearly explained. What the residents didn't know was that their town sat on land chosen for a project deemed too important to fail. Internal reports warned of catastrophic consequences if mistakes were made. Engineers expressed concern. Doctors predicted long-term health risks, but those warnings were ignored. Construction began anyway. At first, the effects were subtle. The water tasted strange. Livestock failed. People complained of headaches, skin burns, and the unexplained fatigue. Doctors were confused, and the authorities dismissed the concerns as coincidence. Then came the accidents, explosions that were never reported, fires explained away as industrial incidents. Entire families were evacuated overnight, sworn to secrecy. By the time the truth started to surface, it was already too late. What happened next would reshape how America handled secrecy forever. And that's when the government made its final decision. Silence was cheaper than justice. What the public didn't know was that the disaster had already been predicted. Years before the incident, internal reports had warned about structural failures, toxic exposure risks, and the human error just waiting to happen. Engineers raised concerns. Scientists submitted safety memos. Inspectors quietly flagged red-level threats. But stopping the project would have cost billions, so the warnings were buried. On the surface, everything looked normal. Workers showed up every morning. Machines ran on schedule. Local towns depended on the facility for jobs. Politicians praised it as a symbol of American progress. But behind closed doors, panic was growing. Pressure gauges began fluctuating without explanation. Emergency systems failed routine tests. Communication logs recorded unexplained power losses late at night. Then came the final week. Workers reported headaches. Animals near the site started dying. Nearby water sources changed color. These signs were documented but never shared with the public. On the night of the disaster, a small malfunction triggered a massive chain reaction. What should have been a minor shutdown turned into total system failure. Alarms screamed through the facility. Doors sealed automatically. Inside, hundreds of workers were trapped. Outside, officials made a decision that would change everything. Instead of ordering a full evacuation, they ordered silence. Emergency responders were told to stand down. News stations received scripted statements. Local authorities were instructed not to speak. By morning, the area was locked down by federal forces. The official explanation? A routine industrial accident. But the truth was far darker. The damage wasn't contained. Invisible contaminants spread into the air, the soil, the water. Entire communities were exposed without any warning. People got sick, but doctors were ordered not to connect the symptoms. Families living nearby were quietly relocated under the guise of urban development. Graves appeared with no more names. Records disappeared. Maps were redrawn. And the disaster was erased from public memory. But not completely. Decades later, classified documents began leaking. Survivors spoke anonymously. Independent researchers connected the dots. And what they revealed shocked the nation. This wasn't just negligence. It was a calculated cover-up. And the people who paid the price were ordinary Americans who never even knew what hit them. For years, the disaster had lived only in whispers spoken quietly by survivors, buried in forgotten court filings, and hidden inside classified government archives that almost no one had ever seen. But silence doesn't last forever. In the late 1970s, a former federal engineer broke it. He wasn't famous. He wasn't a politician. He was a man nearing retirement, haunted by what he had helped cover up decades earlier. In a sworn statement later discovered by investigative journalists, he admitted something chilling. The government had known the disaster was coming. Not days before, not weeks before, years before. Internal reports warned that the infrastructure was unstable, the materials unsafe, the conditions mathematically guaranteed to fail. Entire pages were marked with red ink: high risk, loss of life probable, evacuation advised. Those pages never reached the public. They were intercepted, edited, and rewritten into harmless summaries that claimed everything was within acceptable limits. Why? Because stopping the project would have meant admitting fault. And admitting fault would have meant billions in losses and political careers ending overnight. So they made a calculation, not with numbers, but with lives. When the disaster finally happened, it unfolded exactly as the reports predicted. Structures failed in sequence, one after another, like dominoes. Emergency systems collapsed fast. Communications went silent. Rescue teams arrived too late or were never sent at all. People trapped inside waited for help that never came. Some wrote final notice. Some recorded audio messages. Some simply disappeared. Official reports later claimed the death toll was limited, but leaked internal documents told a different story. Hundreds more were unaccounted for than officially acknowledged. Entire families vanished from records. Children listed as relocated were never found. The land itself was declared unsafe shortly after AND sealed. No more memorial was built. No more National Day of Remembrance was announced. Instead, the site was quietly repurposed. Fences went up. No ownership papers were filed. Warning signs cited environmental hazards but never explained what actually happened, sir. Locals who tried to talk were dismissed as conspiracy theorists. Until journalists started digging. Using Freedom of Information Act requests, reporters uncovered thousands of pages of redacted files. Names were blacked out. Dates were missing. Conclusions were erased. But patterns remained. AND patterns tell stories. One journalist described opening a box of declassified materials and realizing something terrifying. The disaster wasn't a mistake. It was an accepted risk they chose to take. When survivors tried to sue, cases were stalled for decades. Judges cited national interest. Settlements were offered quietly, under strict non-disclosure agreements. Money in exchange for silence. Most accepted. Some refused. Those who refused paid a price. Careers ended. Reputations were destroyed. Lives were disrupted by endless legal pressure. One survivor later said, "They didn't just erase what happened. They erased US." Today, if you search for this disaster online, you'll find fragments, conflicting numbers, vague summaries, short paragraphs in history books that never explain the full scale. But beneath those fragments lies a story of warnings ignored, truth buried, and the accountability avoided. And the most disturbing part, similar warning signs still appear today. Reports marked confidential, risks labeled acceptable, lives reduced to calculations. History doesn't always repeat itself. Sometimes, it's deliberately hidden, waiting for someone to uncover it again. Thank you for watching. If this story matters to you, share it, and make sure to subscribe so we can continue to uncover the histories that were meant to be forgotten.